My entitled half-sister demanded I cater her high society wedding for free, so I made sure the in-laws saw the full invoice. In the elite culinary industry, true excellence isn't just about flavor profiles. It is about absolute operational precision, meticulous sourcing, and rigid financial transparency. As the executive chef and sole proprietor of a premier corporate catering firm, my entire reputation is built on managing high-stakes, six-figure events for the city's most prominent families. My half-sister Chloe, however, viewed my career as nothing more than glorified domestic labor. When she managed to worm her way into an engagement with Julian Harrington, the heir to an ultra-wealthy, traditional old-money family, she demanded that I cater her 300-guest luxury reception completely for free. To maintain the illusion that she was an independently wealthy socialite, she ordered me to hide our relation, dress as a standard line servant, and remained strictly confined to the kitchen. What Chloe fundamentally failed to realize was that old money families are pathologically obsessed with line-item financial metrics, and my corporate billing compliance was about to tear her facade completely apart. Have spent the last 12 years building Vanguard Culinary Group from a single industrial prep kitchen into one of the most sought-after high-end catering operations in the region. We do not do standard buffet lines. We orchestrate multi-course Michelin-caliber dining experiences for corporate galas, political fundraisers, and private estate weddings. Because I spend my days managing a massive staff of sous chefs, coordinates with international luxury ingredient suppliers, and signing non-disclosure agreements for high-profile clients. I view food through a lens of absolute corporate metrics. I dress in standard kitchen utility gear, drive a spacious cargo transport vehicle for logistics, and keep my personal financial success completely quiet. My half-sister, Chloe, operated on a deficit of reality. She was a professional influencer who spent her life chasing the aesthetic appearance of wealth while accumulating thousands of dollars in credit card debt. She lived a parasitic existence, constantly extracting money from our enabling mother and looking down on my kitchen job with a smug, condescending pity. She frequently dropped remarks at family holidays about how unfortunate it was that I spent my life sweating over hot stoves while she was building a lifestyle brand. She assumed that because I didn't post photographs of designer handbags on social media, I was barely scraping by on a line cook's hourly wage. Everything shifted for Chloe 6 months ago when she met Julian Harrington. The Harrington family was local royalty, old shipping and banking money that lived on a massive, gated, historic estate. They were intensely private, fiercely traditional, and deeply skeptical of outside social climbers. To solidify her position, Chloe constructed an elaborate web of lies. She presented herself to Julian's hypercritical mother, Eleanor Harrington, as an independently wealthy boutique lifestyle consultant who came from a background of quiet, comfortable means. The crisis officially arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Chloe bypassed my office secretary and marched directly into my private tasting studio, her designer heels clicking loudly against the polished concrete. She didn't offer a greeting. She simply threw a thick, luxury leather wedding planner onto my desk, her face set in an expression of absolute entitled desperation. "Vivian, I need you to completely clear your calendar for the first Saturday of next month," Chloe commanded, leaning over my desk. "Julian and I are finalizing our reception at the Harrington estate. Eleanor insists on a 5-star locally sourced seafood and truffle menu for 300 guests. I told her I had the perfect elite connection, so I'm going to need you to fully handle the culinary production." I opened the planner, scanning the highly complex multi-course requirements she had outlined. I calmly calculated the baseline wholesale ingredient cost, kitchen labor, and logistics overhead in my head. It was easily an $85,000 luxury operation. I picked up my pen, opened my corporate billing software, and asked her for her primary billing address to send the initial deposit invoice. Chloe let out a sharp, offended gasp, her eyes widening in absolute disbelief. "An invoice? Are you entirely out of your mind?" she hissed, dropping her voice into a furious whisper. "I am your sister, Vivian. This wedding is my one and only chance to permanently secure my place in high society. I shouldn't have to pay a single dime for your services. You should be honored to have the Harrington family name associated with your little cooking business." I calmly informed her that Vanguard Culinary Group does not operate as a family charity, and that the sheer cost of premium caviar, imported truffles, and a 40-person service staff required immediate capital layout. Chloe's face twisted into an expression of pure, unadulterated venom. She leaned closer, unleashing the psychological leverage she had been holding over me for years. She reminded me that our father's ongoing long-term medical care facilities were heavily subsidized by our mother's estate, and threatened that if I refused to comply with her demands, she would ensure our mother cut off all communications, preventing me from managing our father's specialized medical decisions. Before I could even respond to the blackmail, Chloe leveled her final, most insulting condition. "And let's be entirely clear about one more thing. she said coldly, adjusting her coat. When you are working the event at the Harrington estate, you are not to tell a single soul that we are related. I told Eleanor that my family consists of wealthy, retired professionals. I will not have my high society wedding ruined by an embarrassing working-class relative running around in a stained apron. You will stay strictly confined to the kitchen, dress in standard back-of-house uniform, and let my event coordinator handle the front room. Do we have an absolute understanding? I sat perfectly still behind my desk, a cold clinical focus washing over me. I looked at the luxury wedding planner, then looked at my deeply toxic half-sister, letting a calm, compliant smile settle over my face. She thought she could use family guilt to extort $85,000 of corporate services from me while simultaneously treating me like an embarrassing secret. She had absolutely no idea that in the world of luxury corporate catering, the kitchen controls the data. I looked up at her, closed the planner, and told her that she could consider the culinary production fully secured. I assured her that I would adhere strictly to her request to remain invisible to her guests, and that I would personally ensure the Harrington family received the exact financial transparency they deserve. The 3 weeks leading up to the Harrington wedding were a masterclass in culinary logistics and absolute psychological restraint. Chloe sent an endless barrage of frantic, demanding emails at all hours of the night, constantly upgrading the menu. She demanded grade A Japanese A5 Wagyu, wild-caught bluefin tuna tartar, and sheets of edible 24-karat gold leaf to garnish the dessert stations. I approved every single luxury upgrade without a single word of pushback, methodically logging the soaring costs into my corporate inventory system. By the time the menu was finalized, the wholesale cost of raw ingredients, specialized staff labor, and transport logistics sat at an astronomical $94,250. What Chloe fundamentally failed to understand about the ultra-wealthy tier of society she was trying so desperately to infiltrate was that old money is pathologically meticulous about financial governance. The Harrington family wealth didn't survive for generations by throwing unvetted cash at luxury vendors. Their entire estate operated under a rigid family office trust, meaning every single external contractor stepping onto their property had to be fully vetted for liability insurance, health compliance, and tax documentation. Chloe, in her superficial ignorance, truly believed she could simply smuggle a 40-person commercial catering crew onto a high-security estate without a single piece of corporate paperwork changing hands. The trap was fully laid the morning of the wedding. I arrived at the sprawling Harrington estate in our company's unmarked black transport vehicles. Adhering strictly to Chloe's toxic mandates, I wore my standard unbranded back-of-house chef's whites, kept my hair tucked tightly beneath a black cap, and instructed my entire staff to refer to me exclusively as chef rather than by my name. When Chloe saw me rolling the heavy refrigeration cases through the estate's service entrance, she gave me a look of immense, smug satisfaction. She was dressed in her designer silk robe, surrounded by her bridal party, and she leaned in to whisper a final condescending warning. "The food better be flawless, Vivian. Eleanor is watching everything today. Just stay back here in the shadows, keep your mouth shut, and make sure nobody finds out where you actually come from." I simply nodded, smiled, and turned back to my prep stations. The reception dinner was an absolute, undisputed triumph. My team operated with the synchronized efficiency of a Swiss watch. We served the bluefin tuna on chilled block salt, followed by a perfectly seared Wagyu course that had the entire dining pavilion speaking in hushed, reverent tones. From the kitchen viewing window, I watched Eleanor Harrington, the formidable matriarch of the family, taste the food, her sharp, critical eyes softening with immediate approval. She was a woman who knew exactly what Michelin-caliber production tasted like, and she was clearly deeply impressed. The climax of my plan arrived right as the kitchen staff was preparing the final espresso and dessert service. The kitchen doors swung open, and Eleanor Harrington walked into the back-of-house prep area, flanked by her family office trust administrator, a stern man holding a leather ledger. Eleanor carried herself with the quiet, terrifying authority of old money, her eyes sweeping over our pristine stainless steel workstations before landing directly on me. "Chef," Eleanor said, her voice echoing clearly over the hum of the commercial dishwashers. "I have dined at the finest estates in Europe, and I must tell you that this culinary presentation is the most spectacular display I have witnessed in this city for a decade. The Harrington family demands absolute excellence, and you have delivered it." I bowed my head slightly, maintaining absolute professional decorum. "Thank you, Mrs. Harrington. My team prides itself on total operational precision." Eleanor nodded, turning slightly to her trust administrator. "As you know, our family office manages all events hosted on this estate through our structural trust for tax and corporate compliance purposes. Chloe informed us that her family's private estate was fully financing this $90,000 culinary production as an independent wedding gift to the couple. However, my administrator requires the formal vendor sign-off, the liability clearance waivers, and the itemized tax receipt for our permanent corporate records. I felt a cold, incredibly clean wave of satisfaction wash over me. I reached over to my aluminum workstation clipboard, pulled out a beautifully bound, gold-embossed leather corporate portfolio, and slid it directly into Eleanor's hands. "I have the entire corporate compliance packet ready for you right here, Mrs. Harrington," I said calmly. "It contains our health certifications, our multi-million-dollar liability insurance riders, and the final itemized corporate invoice." Eleanor opened the portfolio, her sharp eyes instantly tracking the financial data. The room went completely dead silent as her gaze scanned the breakdown of the $94,250 total. But it wasn't just the soaring number that caused her expression to freeze. It was the bold crimson text stamped across the primary corporate billing line, which read, "Status, unpaid, 100% corporate donation. Sponsor, Vivian, Chief Executive Officer of Vanguard Culinary Group. Relation to bride, biological half-sister. Terms, complies fully with the bride's explicit written directive to provide a zero-cost luxury service to ensure her family appears independently wealthy to the Harrington estate. Eleanor." Harrington stared at the document, her face turning an unyielding, icy shade of pale as the entire matrix of Chloe's financial fabrications, social climbing lies, and cruel family manipulation shattered in front of her eyes in a single second. She slowly looked up from the invoice, her gaze locking onto my face with a terrifying, razor-sharp focus. "Your name is Vivian?" Eleanor asked, her voice dropping into a dangerous, quiet register. "You are Chloe's biological sister, the owner of the city's premier private equity culinary firm?" "Yes, Mrs. Harrington," I replied flatly, wiping down my station with absolute composure. "But per Chloe's strict, written operational guidelines for this event, I am required to remain a hidden line servant today, so my working-class presence doesn't embarrass her in front of high society." Eleanor's jaw tightened so hard I could hear the faint click of her teeth. She didn't scream, and she didn't throw a tantrum. Instead, she slowly closed the leather portfolio, turned to her trust administrator, and spoke with an icy, definitive tone that sent a shiver down my spine. "Get my son, Julian, and get the bride. Bring them to the private estate study immediately. It seems our new daughter-in-law has introduced a profound level of corporate fraud into this family trust before the wedding cake has even been cut." The Harrington legal team had already initiated a fast-track annulment proceeding based on material fraud. Because Chloe had signed the family office registry under completely false financial declarations, the Harringtons' attorneys were able to insulate Julian's assets within a matter of hours, effectively rendering the marriage null and void before the weekend had even concluded. Eleanor Harrington, true to the uncompromising honor of old money governance, refused to allow her family name to remain indebted to my firm. She instructed her trust administrator to immediately cut a certified, full-value check to Vanguard Culinary Group for the exact amount of $94,250. She made it explicitly clear that the Harringtons would pay their debts in full, but that the check would be the absolute final transaction involving anyone related to Chloe. As my staff packed the commercial refrigeration cases back into our unmarked transport vehicles, I watched from the estate courtyard as security escorted Chloe out of the main gates. She was still wearing her luxury wedding dress, her designer heels dragging through the gravel as she sobbed hysterically into her phone, desperately calling her mother. She had entered the estate believing she had successfully swindled her way into a lifetime of unearned luxury, only to be cast out with absolutely nothing but a shattered reputation and a pile of designer credit card debt. The threat she had leveled against our father's medical care evaporated before she could even attempt to execute it. Armed with the full $94,250 payment from the Harrington Trust and the ironclad evidence of Chloe's extortion attempt, I bypassed our mother entirely. I retained a top-tier elder law firm the following Monday morning, successfully petitioning the court for sole, unassailable legal guardianship over our father's medical and financial estates. I assumed 100% of his long-term care expenses through my firm's corporate revenue, permanently stripping both Chloe and our enabling mother of any legal authority to micromanage his life ever again. Within months, the public fallout from the aborted Harrington wedding completely ruined Chloe's digital brand. The high society circles she had spent her youth chasing blacklisted her instantly, and her lifestyle consultancy boutique folded under the weight of her soaring debts. She was forced to move back into our mother's suburban home, completely trapped in the very middle-class reality she had spent her life treating with absolute disdain. Today, Vanguard Culinary Group is expanding into 2 new metropolitan territories, parties, orchestrating even larger high-stakes corporate galas and private elite events. I still wear my standard back-of-house chef's whites, and I still operate entirely beneath the radar. Chloe believed that the superficial optics of wealth and loud manipulation could easily conquer my quiet, hard-working silence. But she forgot the most fundamental rule of the luxury industry. A flawless presentation is entirely meaningless if the foundation is built on bad data. And in the end, the kitchen always keeps the receipts.